The text message goes to the wrong number at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March, when New York City's winter refuses to admit that spring exists on any calendar that matters to people without heat in their apartments. Maya Chen's fingers shake so badly that she mistypes the number twice before finally hitting send, her thumb leaving a smear of blood across the screen from where she'd cut it on broken glass during her desperate attempt to barricade the bedroom door with a dresser that weighs maybe 40 pounds soaking wet. The message is simple, direct, and carries the kind of terror that transcends autocorrect and proper punctuation. He's coming for me. Please. 4th floor, 2847, Morrison Street, apartment 4C. He has a key. I can hear him in the stairwell. Please hurry. She'd met a texter best friend Lucia, whose boyfriend is a cop, whose number she'd memorized during better times when memorizing things felt like a safety net rather than a desperate gamble. But panic makes numbers blur, makes memory unreliable, makes everything except the sound of footsteps climbing stairs feel distant and unimportant. The phone sits silent in her hand for exactly 43 seconds while she counts her heartbeats and listens to her ex-husband's boots hit each step with the methodical patience of someone who knows his prey has nowhere left to run. Maya's daughter Lily sleeps in the next room, 4 years old and dreaming about the birthday party that's supposed to happen this weekend, completely unaware that her mother is currently wedged behind a dresser that won't stop anyone determined, holding a phone like it's a weapon that might somehow materialize help from digital signals and desperate hope. The apartment is cold enough that she can see her breath, the landlord having forgotten to fix the boiler again despite 3 weeks of complaints and one official violation notice that resulted in absolutely nothing except an eviction, threat disguised as concern about her constant negativity affecting other tenants. If you're enjoying the story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The phone vibrates in her hand with a response that arrives so fast it seems impossible, like the person on the other end was waiting for exactly this message, exactly this crisis, exactly this moment when someone's life balanced on the edge of a wrong number and miracle. Address confirmed. Do not open the door for anyone. Move away from windows. I'm 8 minutes out. Maya stares at the message with the kind of confusion that fear allows when adrenaline provides brief clarity before panic reasserts control. The response is wrong in every way that matters. Too fast, too certain, too commanding in a way that suggests authority she hasn't requested and doesn't understand. This isn't Lucia's texting style, which runs toward excessive emojis and casual grammar that makes every crisis feel manageable through friendship and wine, and the kind of support that comes from knowing someone since high school. This is something else entirely. Something that feels dangerous in a different way than Marcus climbing those stairs with the keys he'd refused to return after the divorce. Keys he copied before she'd even known to ask for them back. Keys that represented his absolute certainty that she would never truly escape him. Another text arrives before she can process the first. How many hostels? Are you injured? Is anyone else in the apartment with you? The language is wrong, militaristic and precise in a way that suggests this person texts about violence regularly enough to have developed efficient shorthand for exactly these situations. Hostiles, not attackers, or the person threatening you, but hostiles, like she'd accidentally contacted someone whose world operates on tactical assessment rather than civilian panic. Maya's fingers move before her brain fully engages with the strangeness, because 8 minutes feels like salvation regardless of who's offering it, and questioning rescue seems like a luxury she can't afford when Marcus is now on the 3rd floor landing, his breathing audible through her apartment's thin door. 1. My ex-husband. He's almost here. My daughter is sleeping in the next room. She's 4. Please hurry. He's going to kill me this time. The last sentence types itself. Truth she's been avoiding for 3 months since the divorce finalized and Marcus's behavior shifted from controlling to actively homicidal. The bruises from 2 weeks ago have faded from purple to yellow-green, hidden under long sleeves and careful makeup, and the kind of lies that women tell when admitting the truth means involving systems that historically protect men who know how to perform normalcy better than their victims can prove danger. She'd filed for a restraining order. The judge had looked at her lack of sufficient evidence and Marcus's respectable job as hospital administrator and given her a lecture about not weaponizing the legal system against ex-spouses during contentious divorces, like the handprint bruise on her throat had been digitally edited rather than photographed by the urgent care doctor who'd written, inconsistent with patient's explanation of injury, in notes that apparently weren't sufficient for family court standards. The response comes in seconds. Copy. Secure the child. Stay away from the front door. Cavalry arriving in 6 minutes. Cavalry. The word choice would be almost funny if Marcus wasn't currently inserting his key into her door's top lock, the metallic scratch audible even through the bedroom's closed door, and her own thundering heartbeat. Maya moves on instinct, abandoning her barricade position to rush into Lily's room where her daughter sleeps, surrounded by stuffed animals and drawings of families that include a daddy who isn't currently breaking into their apartment with intentions Maya doesn't want to imagine but can't stop picturing. She scoops Lily from the bed with the practiced efficiency of a mother who's learned to move her child without fully waking her, a skill developed during their first month in this apartment when night terrors had been Lily's primary response to the divorce and displacement and the constant tension that children absorb even when adults think they're hiding it successfully. Lily mumbles something about purple cake and rainbow unicorns, her small body warm and trusting in Maya's arms in ways that make the current situation feel simultaneously more terrifying and more clarifying, because failing to protect herself is one thing, but failing to protect this perfect small person is completely unacceptable regardless of what it requires. The front door opens with a click that sounds like a gunshot in the apartment's silence, followed by Marcus's voice, pitched to Carrie. "Maya, baby, I know you're here. I just want to talk. Why are you making this so difficult?" The reasonableness in his tone is more frightening than shouting would be, because it's the voice he uses with hospital staff and divorce attorneys and anyone whose opinion of him matters more than Maya's reality. The performance of sanity that makes her look crazy by contrast, makes her fear seem like hysteria rather than survival instinct. Maya's bedroom has exactly one feature that justifies the apartment's otherwise criminal rent: a fire escape accessible through a window that opens despite decades of paint layers that required a hammer and determination to initially break free. She'd opened it exactly once, during their first week here, checking escape routes with the kind of paranoia that poverty and danger cultivate. The metal platform outside is narrow and rusty and definitely violates several building codes, but it leads down to an alley that connects to the street, and right now that matters more than structural integrity or legal compliance. Her phone vibrates again. Status. The single word carries weight. Demand for information that suggests whoever is on the other end is currently moving through the city with purpose and planning that requires real-time updates to adjust approach. Maya types one-handed while holding Lily. He's inside. "We're going out the bedroom window to fire escape. East side of building." "Negative. Stay inside. Fire escape exposes you. Secure the bedroom door and wait. I'm 4 minutes out." The commanding tone should annoy her, this stranger issuing orders like he has any authority over her decisions, like his mysterious cavalry matters more than her own judgment about what keeps her daughter safe. But something in the certainty stops her movement toward the window, makes her reconsider the fire escape that suddenly seems less like salvation and more like trap where Marcus could follow them into darkness and confine space without witnesses to whatever he's planned. Maya locks her bedroom door with a flimsy mechanism that wouldn't stop a determined child, much less a man Marcus's size who works out religiously and once punched through their old apartment's drywall during an argument about Maya having coffee with a male colleague. She can hear him moving through the apartment, opening doors and checking rooms with a systematic approach of someone who's thought through the scenario, who's planned for her resistance and calculated how to overcome it. "Maya, you're being ridiculous," Marcus calls out, his footsteps approaching the bedroom. "I just want to see Lily. I have rights. The court gave me visitation, and you can't just refuse to follow the custody agreement because you're still angry about the divorce." The lie is almost perfect, would be believable to anyone who didn't know that the custody agreement requires supervised visitation at a neutral location precisely because the judge had been concerned about Marcus's intensity, even while dismissing Maya's fears as exaggeration. Tonight is Tuesday. His supervised visits are Saturdays at 2 p.m. at a facility designed for exactly these situations where fathers can't be trusted alone with their children, where social workers document interactions, and write reports that Maya reads with growing horror as she realizes how effectively Marcus performs for audiences while saving his real self for private moments. Her phone lights up with another message. Police have been notified as backup. Primary response is still 3 minutes out. Do you have anything you can use as a weapon? The question is so pragmatic, so utterly divorced from the fantasy that police would actually arrive in time to prevent whatever Marcus intends, that Maya almost laughs with the hysteria that's been building since she'd heard his footsteps in the stairwell. She looks around the bedroom with new eyes, cataloging potential weapons from the contents of a life that's been systematically reduced through poverty and escape. A lamp with a heavy base, the metal frame of a chair from the thrift store, the scissors she'd used yesterday to cut tags off Lily's new-to-her clothing from the church donation box. Scissors, a lamp, nothing that would stop him if he's really committed. The response is immediate. Then don't engage. Stay quiet. Let him think you've left via the fire escape. I'm 2 minutes away. The doorknob rattles as Marcus tests it, his facade of reasonableness cracking slightly when he encounters the locked door. Maya, open this door right now. I know my daughter is in there. You can't keep her from me. I'm her father. The possessive emphasis on my and her makes Maya's skin crawl, because Lily isn't a person to Marcus. She's property, an extension of his ownership claim over Maya herself, the one thing he can still control now that the divorce has legally severed his access to everything else. Lily stirs in Maya's arms, starting to wake from the combination of being moved and her father's voice penetrating her dreams. Her eyes open with the confused sweetness of a child transitioning from sleep to consciousness, not yet aware that anything is wrong. Mama! The word is soft, questioning, seeking reassurance that everything is okay despite the strange circumstances of being held in her mother's arms in darkness, while Daddy's voice comes from the wrong side of the locked door. Shh, baby, it's okay, Maya whispers, carrying her daughter into the closet where at least they'll have one more barrier between them and whatever Marcus does next. We're playing a game. We have to be very quiet. Lily accepts this explanation the way 4-year-olds accept most things their mothers tell them, snuggling closer and sticking her thumb in her mouth in a gesture she'd mostly outgrown but returns to during stress. The door shudders as Marcus puts a shoulder against it, testing its strength, and the cheap wood flexes in ways that confirm it won't withstand serious force. Maya can practically hear him calculating whether breaking it down is worth the noise that might alert neighbors, whether witnesses matter when he's already committed to being here. Last chance, Maya, Marcus says, his voice dropping to the cold tone that precedes violence, the one that means negotiation is over and consequences are beginning. Open this door, or I'm coming through it, and you won't like what happens next. Maya's phone vibrates. 30 seconds. Stay quiet. This is almost over. She wants to believe the message, wants to trust that rescue is actually coming instead of being an elaborate prank or misunderstanding that will leave her exactly where she started, alone with a man who's decided that if he can't have her, nobody will, and if he can't have normal access to his daughter, he'll take permanent possession in whatever way his broken mind has calculated makes sense. The crash of the door splintering inward is loud enough that Lily startles against Maya's chest, her small gasp of fear breaking the silence they've been maintaining. Marcus appears in the doorway, backlit by the living room's lights, his silhouette massive and dark and utterly terrifying in ways that domestic abuse statistics can't capture, because numbers don't convey the specific horror of watching someone you once loved transform into the monster they'd apparently always been under the performance of normalcy. There you are, he says, stepping into the room with deliberate slowness that suggests he's savoring this moment, the absolute power of having trapped her with nowhere left to run. Did you really think you could hide from me? In my own daughter's bedroom? The possessive claim grates against everything Maya knows about how custody works, about how Lily belongs to herself rather than to either of them, but correcting his grammar seems less important than the way he's pulling something from his jacket pocket, something that catches the ambient light in a way that makes Maya's blood turn to ice. A knife. Not kitchen size, but the kind men carry when they intend to use them, when they've thought through exactly how to solve problems that involve people who won't cooperate with being controlled. Maya's phone is still in her hand, though Marcus hasn't seemed to notice it yet, his attention fixed on her face with the kind of intensity that suggests he's been imagining this confrontation, rehearsing his lines, planning the sequence of events that ends with him reasserting the control that divorce had legally stolen. She types with her thumb, not looking at the screen, because maintaining eye contact with Marcus feels crucial to surviving the next seconds. He has a knife. He's going to kill us. The response comes in the eternal second before Marcus moves toward the closet. Don't move. He'll hear sirens in 10 seconds. I'm entering the building now. Maya doesn't understand how the stranger knows what Marcus will hear, doesn't comprehend how anyone could coordinate timing this precisely from wherever they're coming from, doesn't question any of it because belief feels safer than skepticism when you're holding your daughter in a closet while your ex-husband advances with a weapon. The sirens start exactly when promised, growing from distant to immediate with a speed that suggests multiple vehicles converging from different directions, the specific multi-toned wailing that means serious police response rather than casual patrol passing by. Marcus freezes mid-step, his expression transforming from predatory certainty to confusion to rage as he processes this unexpected development. You call the fucking cops? After everything. You know what happens now, Maya. You know they won't get here in time. He's right and wrong simultaneously. Police response in this neighborhood typically takes 15 minutes minimum, long enough for domestic situations to escalate and conclude before intervention arrives. Long enough that calling them often feels like symbolic gesture rather than actual protection. But these sirens are already here, already stopping outside the building, and Maya doesn't understand how that's possible, doesn't care about the logistics when the cavalry that mysterious stranger promised is apparently real rather than false hope from a wrong number text. Marcus's calculation changes visibly, his grip on the knife tightening as he weighs options that have suddenly narrowed dramatically. He could still do what he came to do, accept the consequences that arrest and prosecution would bring, or he could retreat, preserve his freedom and public reputation, live to try again when surveillance and witnesses aren't factors. The apartment's front door, already damaged from his entry, crashes inward again with the sound of professional force application, the kind that uses rams or heavy boots to overcome resistance that keys and locks present. NYPD, show me your hands. The voice carries authority that Marcus recognizes even through his rage, the tone of people trained to use violence legally and prepared to do it without hesitation if circumstances justify force. But before Marcus can respond, before Maya can even process that police have actually arrived faster than physics should allow in a city where emergency response is notoriously slow, another voice cuts through the chaos, this one different, colder, more dangerous, carrying weight that has nothing to do with legal authority and everything to do with the kind of power that money and reputation create. Step away from them. Now. Or the police will be the least of your problems. The figure that appears behind the police officers isn't wearing a uniform. He's dressed in a black suit that probably costs more than Maya's annual rent, his dark hair perfectly styled despite the late hour, his expression containing the kind of controlled fury that suggests violence is always an option, just rarely the first choice. Dante Volkov stands in her destroyed doorway like an avenging angel, if angels wore Armani, and commanded the kind of presence that makes rooms rearrange themselves around their will. Marcus looks between the police and this new arrival, his confusion evident because nothing about this situation matches what he'd planned, what he'd expected, what his narcissism had allowed him to imagine as possible outcomes. "Who the fuck are you?" Marcus demands, though his voice lacks conviction, already sensing that he's miscalculated in ways he doesn't yet understand. Dante's smile is a terrible thing to witness, containing no warmth, only the promise of consequences that transcend legal systems. I'm the person she accidentally texted instead of her friend. I'm the person who just bought this building. I'm the person who's going to make sure you never come near her or that child again. And I'm the reason these officers are going to ensure you're charged with breaking and entering, violating a restraining order, and assault with a deadly weapon. Which one would you like me to elaborate on first? The police move forward, reading Marcus's rights while confiscating the knife and forcing him to his knees with the kind of professional efficiency that suggests they've done this before, that domestic violence calls are routine despite each one feeling apocalyptic to the people involved. Maya watches it happen from her position in the closet, still holding Lily, still processing that someone actually came, that rescue was real rather than fantasy, that a wrong number text somehow materialized into salvation standing in her bedroom in a suit that costs more than her car had when she'd owned a car. Dante's eyes find hers across the chaos of arrest and police procedure, and something in his expression softens fractionally, the dangerous man becoming briefly human in a way that makes her simultaneously grateful and terrified about what obligations might accompany tonight's rescue. "You're safe now," he says, and despite everything Maya's learned about trusting men who make promises, she finds herself believing him. The police station smells like industrial cleaner and desperation, fluorescent lights creating the kind of harsh illumination that makes everyone look guilty regardless of their actual innocence or involvement in whatever crimes brought them here at 1:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning in March. Maya sits in an interview room with Lily sleeping across her lap, the child's exhaustion finally overwhelming the adrenaline that had kept her wide-eyed and silent during the arrest and transport, during the questions and photographs, and the systematic documentation of violence that hadn't quite happened but had been prevented by minutes, and a wrong number, and a man who currently stands outside the glass door talking to detectives with the body language of someone accustomed to being listened to. Dante Volkov hasn't left since arriving at the building, his presence constant throughout the police response and evidence collection, and Marcus's removal in handcuffs while screaming about his rights, and how Maya had orchestrated this entire situation to steal his daughter and ruin his life. The restraining order violation alone means Marcus won't be released tonight, the detective had explained while photographing the broken bedroom door and the knife that would be entered as evidence. The breaking and entering adds weight. The weapon makes it felony territory. But the real protection comes from the assault charge that the DA will pursue regardless of whether Maya wants to testify, because attempted violence with a deadly weapon is something the state prosecutes independently once sufficient evidence exists. Maya had listened to this explanation with the numbness that follows adrenaline crash, nodding at appropriate moments while internally processing that her life had transformed completely in the span of 90 minutes, that nothing would ever return to the careful normalcy she'd been constructing since escaping Marcus 8 months ago. A victim advocate had appeared with pamphlets about domestic violence resources and emergency housing and the legal processes that would unfold over the coming weeks. Her kindness genuine, but overwhelming in its implications about how Maya's life would now be categorized, what systems she become enmeshed in, what permanent record tonight would create. Dante returns carrying coffee in paper cups that shouldn't exist in police stations at this hour, but apparently do when requested by people whose influence extends beyond normal civilian limitations. He sets one in front of Maya with the careful attention of someone trying not to wake a sleeping child, then takes the chair opposite hers with the fluid grace of men who've spent money on movement training or martial arts or whatever discipline creates that particular kind of controlled physicality. "The DA is filing charges in the morning," he says without preamble, his voice pitched low to match the interview room's late-night quiet. "Marcus Chin will be arraigned by noon, and they're recommending bail be set at $50,000, which he likely can't make immediately given his financial situation." Maya processes the information with confusion that must show on her face, because how does the stranger know Marcus's financial situation? No details about bail recommendations that haven't been officially decided yet. Speak with the certainty of someone who's somehow orchestrated tonight's legal proceedings despite having no official role in any of it. "How do you know all that?" she asks, her voice rough from not having spoken in over an hour beyond answering the detective's questions about timeline and threat assessment, and whether she'd felt safe in the apartment before tonight's incident. Dante's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes acknowledges the question's validity. "I make it my business to know things that matter. And after receiving your text, you became something that mattered, which meant learning everything relevant about the situation I was entering." The explanation is both too much and somehow insufficient, raising more questions than it answers about who this man is and what resources he commands, and why a random wrong number text would trigger this level of response and continued involvement. Maya sips the coffee, which is perfect, cream and sugar in proportions she prefers but hasn't specified to anyone, suggesting either lucky guess or investigation that extended to details most people wouldn't bother learning about someone they just met under crisis circumstances. "You said you bought the building," Maya says, focusing on the one concrete claim she can actually verify or disprove. "My building. Tonight, in the middle of responding to my text. I made the offer while en route." Dante confirms without apparent recognition that this is insane behavior, that normal people don't purchase real estate buildings during emergency response to strangers' desperate pleas for help. The owner had been looking to sell for 6 months without finding buyers willing to meet his price. I offered 20% above asking for immediate acceptance and closing within 48 hours. He signed the preliminary paperwork by the time I arrived at your address. The casual revelation of wealth that allows impulse purchases of entire buildings makes Maya's head spin, because she'd been struggling to make rent on a fourth-floor walk-up in a neighborhood where buildings cost maybe $2 million if they're maintained properly, which hers wasn't, meaning Dante had just spent significant money on a property that barely functions, all because she'd accidentally texted him instead of Lucia. Why? The single word contains multitudes. Why buy the building? Why respond to the text at all? Why maintain presence throughout the police proceedings? Why any of this instead of the normal response to wrong numbers, which would have been either ignoring it or sending back, wrong number sorry, and continuing with whatever his life had been before her panic intruded? Dante takes a drink of his own coffee, and Maya notices for the first time that his hands are scarred across the knuckles in a way that suggests violence has been part of his personal history. That controlled grace comes from training that involved actual combat rather than theoretical martial arts practice. Because you needed help, and I was capable of providing it, he says simply, like altruism explains middle-of-the-night building purchases and coordination with police departments, and the continued presence of a man who should have returned to his own life once the immediate crisis resolved. Because your message indicated a child was in danger, and I have particular feelings about children being placed in harm's way by adults who should protect them. The slight edge in his voice when mentioning children suggests personal history Maya doesn't have context for, trauma that informs current choices in ways she can't fully understand without knowing backstory he hasn't offered, and she doesn't feel entitled to request despite his dramatic intervention in her life. Lily shifts in Maya's lap, mumbling something about cake again before settling deeper into sleep, her small body warm and trusting in ways that make every decision Maya's ever made feel simultaneously justified and inadequate. I need to take her home, Maya says, though the word home feels uncertain now, because returning to an apartment with a broken door and Marcus's violence still lingering in the air seems impossible, but she has nowhere else to go, no family in the city, and friends whose sofas are already occupied by their own struggles. The apartment isn't secure, Dante says with the gentle firmness of someone delivering news they know will be unwelcome but necessary. The door was damaged during his entry, and then again during police response. It can't be properly locked until repairs are completed, which won't happen until at least tomorrow afternoon. Maya's exhaustion crashes over her like a wave, the impossibility of her situation suddenly overwhelming in ways the immediate crisis had temporarily obscured. She has maybe $400 in her checking account, not enough for a hotel that accepts children and isn't by the hour dangerous, and using it would mean not making the utility payment that's already late enough to risk disconnection. I'll figure something out, she says, though they both know this is a lie, that she has no solutions that don't involve worse problems than sleeping in an apartment with a broken door. Dante leans forward slightly, his focus absolute in a way that makes the interview room feel smaller, more intimate, like they're the only two people existing in this moment despite the police station's continued activity beyond the glass walls. I own a property in Chelsea, he says carefully, each word placed with deliberate precision. A townhouse that's fully furnished but currently vacant while renovations are completed on the upper floors. The ground floor and second floor are entirely habitable, secure, and available immediately. You and Lily can stay there while your apartment is repaired and the security situation with your ex-husband is resolved. The offer is too generous, too perfect, arriving with the kind of timing that makes Maya's survival instincts scream warnings about men who rescue women and then extract payment through expectations never explicitly stated but always implied. She'd learned this lesson through Marcus, who'd been charming and helpful and seemingly perfect until marriage and pregnancy had locked her into discovering the control that had always existed beneath the performance of partnership. I can't accept that, Maya says, forcing the words out despite the exhaustion that makes the offer almost irresistible. I don't know you. You don't know me beyond a wrong number text. This is too much. Dante's expression doesn't change, but something in his eyes suggests he'd expected this response, maybe even respected it more than immediate acceptance would have generated. You're right that we don't know each other, he agrees without defensiveness. But circumstances have created a situation where you need security that your current resources can't provide, and I have excess capacity that costs me nothing to extend. This isn't charity requiring gratitude or obligation creating debt. This is practical solution to immediate problem. Nothing is free, Maya counters, her voice harder than she'd intended. Men don't offer housing to strange women without expecting something in return. I've learned that lesson thoroughly enough not to need a refresher course. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. The slight tightening around Dante's eyes suggests her words landed somewhere tender, but his voice remains even when he responds. You're correct that many men operate that way. I'm not asking you to trust that I'm different based on my word alone. I'm suggesting a pragmatic arrangement where you maintain complete autonomy while accepting temporary assistance during a crisis. The townhouse has separate entrances. You would have your own keys. I wouldn't visit without explicit invitation. If at any point you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you leave without explanation or consequence. Maya wants to refuse on principle, wants to maintain the independence she fought so hard to achieve after escaping Marcus's control, wants to prove she can survive without accepting help from men whose motives she can't fully trust. But Lily's weight in her lap is a reminder that pride is a luxury mothers can't always afford, that protecting her daughter matters more than protecting her own dignity, that sometimes survival requires accepting assistance even when the terms make her uncomfortable. How long? She asks, the question itself an admission that she's considering this impossible offer. As long as necessary, Dante says. Minimum 2 weeks while your apartment undergoes proper security upgrades beyond just door replacement. Maximum whatever timeline allows you to establish stable housing that you feel genuinely safe in. The mention of security upgrades crystallizes something Maya should have realized earlier, that as the building's new owner, Dante has both the authority and apparently the intention to transform her 4th-floor walk-up into something more secure than it's ever been, which means his offer extends beyond temporary housing into longer-term investment in her safety. Why are you doing this? Maya asks again, because his earlier explanation didn't actually answer the question beneath the question, didn't address why her specific crisis triggered this level of response and continued commitment. Dante is quiet for a moment, his gaze shifting to the window where early morning darkness is just beginning to show hints of approaching dawn. When he speaks, his voice carries weight that suggests he's sharing something true rather than convenient. 10 years ago, my sister texted me for help during a situation similar to yours. I was in a meeting that I deemed too important to interrupt, so I silenced my phone and told myself I'd call her back in an hour. She didn't survive that hour. Her ex-boyfriend made sure of that. Since then, I've made a policy that messages requesting help receive immediate response regardless of circumstances, regardless of whether I know the person, regardless of convenience. Your text came to the wrong number, but it came to someone who spent a decade ensuring he's never again too busy to respond when someone's life depends on it. The revelation sits between them like physical weight, explaining everything about tonight's response while raising new questions about who Dante Volkov actually is, what resources he commands, why his guilt over his sister's death manifests in purchasing buildings and coordinating police response and offering housing to strangers whose desperation accidentally intersected with his phone number. Maya's throat tightens with emotion. She doesn't have energy to process grief for a woman she never knew mixing with gratitude for rescue that came from tragedy, creating complicated tangle of feelings that will require days or weeks to fully untangle. I'm sorry about your sister, she says quietly, inadequate words for immeasurable loss. So am I, Dante replies with finality that closes the subject while acknowledging her condolences. Which is why you and Lily will stay at the Chelsea property until you feel safe returning to your own apartment or finding alternative housing that meets your security requirements. It's not quite a question anymore, more like decision that's been made and is now being communicated for her acknowledgement rather than approval. Maya should resent the presumption, but exhaustion and pragmatism override pride's objections. Okay, she says, the word feeling like surrender and salvation simultaneously. Thank you. Dante stands with a fluid grace that suggests expensive suits aren't the only luxury he's comfortable with, that his body moves like weapon that's been carefully trained and then carefully restrained through discipline and choice. The car is waiting outside. I'll drive you both to Chelsea now, and you can sleep for however many hours you need. Later today, will coordinate retrieving necessary items from your apartment and discussing longer-term arrangements. Maya lifts Lily carefully. Her daughter's dead weight, the particular heaviness of deeply sleeping children who trust absolutely in their mother's ability to keep them safe despite recent evidence that safety is more fragile than childhood should ever have to recognize. The exit from the police station happens in a blur of final instructions from the victim advocate and the detective's business card and promises about follow-up interviews that will be scheduled once Maya's had time to rest and process. Once the immediate crisis has settled into the bureaucratic reality of prosecution and protection orders and the systematic legal response to violence that almost happened but was prevented by minutes and miracles and money's ability to accelerate normal timelines. The car waiting outside is exactly what Maya should have expected. A black SUV with windows tinted dark enough to be illegal and interior leather soft enough that Lily doesn't stir when Maya settles her into the back seat with the kind of careful attention that mothers develop through years of protecting sleep that's always too brief and too precious to interrupt unnecessarily. Dante drives with the same controlled precision that characterizes everything else about him, navigating Manhattan's pre-dawn streets with familiarity that suggests he knows the city intimately, knows which routes avoid the worst traffic even at hours when traffic shouldn't exist, knows where cameras are positioned and how to move through urban space with minimal documentation. Maya watches the city slide past her window, familiar streets looking foreign at this hour, when most of the world sleeps, and only people displaced by crisis or profession occupy public spaces. She should probably be more concerned about getting into a vehicle with a man she doesn't know, accepting housing from someone whose background check extends no further than his demonstrated willingness to respond to desperate texts. But her risk assessment has already been recalibrated by tonight's events, by the reality that Marcus had been the danger while this stranger had been the salvation, that her judgments about safety have been catastrophically wrong once already and might continue being wrong regardless of what precaution she takes. The townhouse in Chelsea appears through the SUV's window like something from a magazine about how the other half lives. 4 stories of restored brownstone with original architectural details, and windows that probably cost more than most people's cars, situated on a tree-lined street where even the sidewalks look expensive. Dante parks in a private garage beneath the building, access through a gate that requires both keycard and code, security measures that make Maya's apartment building's broken intercom system seem even more inadequate in retrospect. Inside, the space is exactly as promised, fully furnished with the kind of tasteful neutrality that suggests professional interior design rather than personal collection of beloved objects. The ground floor flows between living room and kitchen with the open concept layout that modern wealth prefers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private garden that's currently winter dormant but promises beauty once spring actually arrives instead of just threatening to. The master bedroom is upstairs, Dante says, his voice quiet in the townhouse's sleeping silence. There's a smaller bedroom adjacent that should work for Lily. Both have ensuite bathrooms, and the closets are empty for whatever you need to bring from your apartment. Maya carries Lily up the stairs, her daughter's sleeping weight growing heavier with each step, her own exhaustion making the climb feel like mountaineering despite the townhouse's reasonable proportions. The master bedroom is larger than her entire apartment's main room, decorated in soft grays and whites that create atmosphere of expensive calm. The bed is enormous, dressed in what's probably Egyptian cotton, and down comforters that suggest comfort beyond anything Maya's experienced since childhood, before her own family circumstances had deteriorated into the poverty that eventually led to teenage pregnancy and truncated college dreams, and the decades-long struggle to achieve stability that still feels tenuous even in moments like this, when luxury temporarily surrounds her. The adjacent bedroom is perfect for Lily, smaller but still generous by normal standards, decorated in soft lavenders and creams with a twin bed that looks more comfortable than anything they've previously owned. Maya settles her daughter under covers that smell like expensive detergent and fabric softener, watching her small face relax further into sleep that's finally safe from immediate danger. When Maya returns downstairs, Dante is in the kitchen making tea with the automatic competence of someone who performs domestic tasks regularly despite having the money to pay others for such services. "There's food in the refrigerator and pantry," he says without turning around. "Basic staples, plus some prepared meals that should last several days. If you need anything specific, there's a notepad on the counter where you can write requests, and I'll arrange delivery. The casual mention of arranging delivery suggests staff or services Maya doesn't have context for, systems of wealth that operate invisibly to people whose lives don't typically include personal assistance or whatever infrastructure makes rich people's requests materialize without the friction normal people experience when trying to accomplish basic tasks. The security system's code is written down here, Dante continues, sliding a card across the counter. You'll need to enter it within 30 seconds of opening any exterior door. There are panic buttons in each bedroom and one in the kitchen that connect directly to a private security firm that will respond within 3 minutes of activation. The firm's number is also on this card, along with my personal number, my office number, and my assistant's direct line. Maya takes the card, staring at the list of numbers that represent layers of safety she hasn't experienced since before Marcus, since before adulthood really, when her parents had still been alive and capable of providing the security that died with them in the car accident that left her alone at 19 with student loans and no family support system. I don't know how to thank you, she says finally, inadequate words for overwhelming gratitude and lingering uncertainty about what accepting all this actually means for her autonomy and future obligations. Dante hands her a cup of tea that she doesn't remember requesting but apparently needs based on how her hands wrap around it automatically, seeking warmth that's as much emotional as physical. You don't need to thank me, he says simply. You need to sleep, to process what happened, to begin recovering from trauma that's been ongoing for longer than just tonight. Everything else can wait until you've had time to rest and eat and remember that you're safe now. The certainty in his voice makes Maya want to believe him, makes the exhaustion she's been fighting since the police station finally overwhelming in its demand for surrender to sleep and temporary trust that this strange salvation is real rather than elaborate prelude to different kinds of danger. Will you be here? She asks, unsure whether she's hoping for yes or no, whether his presence would feel like protection or threat given how little she actually knows about him beyond his willingness to rescue strangers and purchase buildings and coordinate emergency responses with professional efficiency. I'll be upstairs on the 3rd floor if you need anything, Dante says, reading her uncertainty accurately. You have complete privacy and security. The door to the 3rd floor staircase locks from your side, giving you control over access. I won't come down without calling first and receiving explicit permission. You're safe here, Maya. That's not something you need to earn or defend or question. The use of her name, which she doesn't remember telling him but which he obviously learned through the same investigation that revealed Marcus's financial situation and her coffee preferences, should feel invasive but instead feels oddly comforting, like being known is less dangerous than being invisible to someone whose resources can actually provide meaningful protection. Maya finishes her tea and moves toward the stairs with exhaustion, pulling at her like physical force, her body demanding rest that her mind hasn't fully granted permission for given the strangeness of circumstances. At the base of the stairs, she turns back to find Dante still in the kitchen, his presence somehow both distant and attentive, giving her space while remaining available if she needs additional reassurance or assistance. Your sister would be proud, Maya says quietly, offering the only gift she has available, acknowledgement that his decade of guilt has transformed into protection that saved her life tonight. What you did for us, what you're continuing to do, it matters. It won't bring her back, but it means something that you've made sure other people don't experience what she did. Dante's expression shifts slightly, grief and gratitude mixing in ways that make him seem briefly more human than the controlled, dangerous presence he's maintained throughout the night. Sleep well, Maya, he says, which isn't quite acceptance of her thanks, but isn't quite refusal either. Tomorrow we'll figure out the practical details. Tonight, just rest. Maya climbs the stairs to the master bedroom where Lily sleeps in the adjacent room, both of them safe in a townhouse in Chelsea owned by a man who'd received a wrong number text and decided to make it right in ways that transcended normal human response to strangers' crises. She doesn't fully understand what's happened tonight or what accepting Dante's help will mean for her life going forward, but lying in a bed more comfortable than anything she's experienced in years, listening to her daughter breathe safely in the next room, Maya allows herself to believe that maybe, impossibly, they're going to be okay. 3 months transforms landscapes in ways that time alone can't explain, the accumulation of small changes creating distances between past and present that feel impossible to measure except through the evidence of lives lived differently than they'd been before. March became April became June, and survival became something more sustainable than daily crisis management. Maya stands in the Chelsea townhouse's kitchen making breakfast for Lily, while morning sunlight streams through windows that face the garden where roses have begun blooming, their colors vivid against the green that spring finally delivered after winter's stubborn resistance to calendars and hope. The apartment on Morrison Street had been repaired and upgraded with security measures that transformed it from vulnerable fourth-floor walk-up into something approaching fortress. New door with commercial-grade locks, security cameras covering every approach, reinforced window frames, an alarm system that connects directly to the private security firm whose number Maya now has memorized despite never needing to use it. She'd returned exactly once to collect their belongings and formally terminate the lease, standing in the space that had been home for 8 months and feeling only relief at leaving it behind, at accepting that sometimes the places we survive in aren't meant to be the places we thrive, that moving forward requires abandoning locations where trauma has soaked into walls despite the best efforts of paint and cleaning products. The Chelsea townhouse had been temporary arrangement that somehow became something more permanent through the accumulated inertia of comfort and safety, and Lily's tearful protests about leaving the garden and her new school where teachers actually had resources and classmates didn't bring their own family traumas into every interaction. Dante had extended the offer quietly, without pressure or expectation, simply mentioning one evening in late April that the townhouse was meant to be occupied rather than sitting empty, that if Maya found it suitable for longer-term housing, he'd be amenable to discussing arrangements that formalized her presence beyond emergency shelter. The rent he'd proposed was exactly what she'd been paying on Morrison Street, absurdly below market value for Chelsea real estate, but presented in a way that suggested this was standard practice rather than special consideration, that he routinely offered below-market housing to single mothers escaping domestic violence rather than this being specific accommodation of her circumstances. Maya had accepted after weeks of internal debate about independence versus pragmatism, about whether living in property owned by a man she'd accidentally texted created obligations that would eventually require payment beyond monthly rent checks, about whether safety and stability for Lily justified compromises to her own autonomy and principles about not being rescued by powerful men whose resources made normal negotiating impossible. The decision had been easier once she started working again, not at the data entry job she'd held before, but at Volkov Industries in their property management division, where her accounting degree had finally found application beyond calculating how many days she could delay utility payments without disconnection. Maria Rodriguez, the HR director, had presented the offer during what Maya thought was an informational interview about career development resources, explaining that the company was expanding operations and needed someone with Maya's educational background and lived experience managing limited resources to help develop affordable housing initiatives. The salary was double what she'd been earning. The benefits included childcare subsidies and educational assistance, and the kind of comprehensive health care that made preventive medicine realistic rather than luxury she couldn't access, and the position reported to a director 3 levels removed from Dante himself, creating professional distance that made the opportunity feel legitimate rather than manufactured specifically for her. Maya had still suspected his involvement until Maria had shown her the position posting that predated March by 6 weeks, the applications from other qualified candidates, the rubric used for evaluation that explained why Maya's combination of accounting skills and personal experience with housing insecurity made her uniquely valuable rather than charity case being accommodated. She'd accepted, started 2 weeks later, and discovered that the work was both challenging and meaningful in ways her previous jobs had never been. That helping develop programs, ensuring other women had access to safe, affordable housing felt like transforming her own trauma into something useful rather than simply surviving what had happened and moving forward without addressing the systemic issues that had made her vulnerable in the first place. Lily appears in the kitchen doorway, wearing her summer camp t-shirt, her hair still damp from the shower, her face bright with the kind of uncomplicated joy that children show when life feels safe enough to experience happiness without constant vigilance for danger that might emerge without warning. "Is Dante coming to my presentation tonight?" Lily asks while climbing onto the stool at the kitchen island, Accepting the strawberry smoothie, Maya slides across to her with the automatic grace of routines established over months. Maya's relationship with Dante has evolved in ways that resist simple categorization, the boundaries between landlord and tenant and employer and employee, and something more personal blurring through accumulated small interactions and shared space, and his consistent presence in their lives despite maintaining the professional distance he'd promised during that first night at the police station. He'd attended Lily's kindergarten graduation in May, sitting beside Maya and applauding when Lily had received the award for Most Improved Reading Skills, his genuine pride in a child he had no legal relationship to somehow feeling appropriate rather than intrusive, given how much his intervention had changed both their trajectories. He'd helped Maya move her limited furniture from Morrison Street, carrying boxes with the efficient strength of someone whose physical capabilities exceed what expensive suits typically suggest, making jokes that made Lily laugh, and treating the whole process like moving day rather than escape from location where violence had almost happened. He'd been present for dinner approximately twice weekly since April, arriving with ingredients and cooking meals that introduced both Maya and Lily to cuisines beyond the budget-conscious pasta and rice dishes that had dominated their previous diet, teaching Lily the names of spices in Italian and Russian while explaining the cultural histories that made certain flavor combinations traditional rather than arbitrary. The progression had been so gradual that Maya hadn't quite noticed when professional courtesy transformed into friendship, and then into something that felt increasingly like courtship, though Dante had never explicitly stated intentions beyond continued support and genuine care for Lily's well-being and Maya's successful transition from crisis to stability. He said he'd try to make it if his meeting finishes on time. Maya answers honestly, because Dante has never made promises to Lily he can't keep, has been careful about managing a 4-year-old's expectations despite his clear desire to be present for moments that matter to a child who's begun seeing him as permanent fixture rather than temporary helper. The presentation is Lily's final project for the summer enrichment program she'd been attending, a program that costs more than Maya's previous monthly rent, but that Dante had somehow arranged scholarship funding for through the foundation he apparently runs that provides educational opportunities for children from families in transition. Though Maya suspects the scholarship materialized specifically for Lily rather than being competitive award from pool of applicants. She tried to refuse the assistance, had argued that accepting so much help created dependencies that worried her given how thoroughly Marcus's initial generosity had masked the control that came later, how being rescued had been prelude to being owned in ways she barely escaped. Dante had listened to her concerns without defensiveness, acknowledged that her caution was wisdom earned through terrible experience, and then explained that Lily's opportunities shouldn't be limited by Maya's justifiable distrust of men who offer help, that the scholarship existed whether or not Lily accepted it and would go to another child if she refused, that Maya's autonomy was about choosing what served her daughter's future rather than making decisions based on fear of obligation that he'd explicitly stated didn't exist. The conversation had happened in late May, after dinner at the townhouse, while Lily slept upstairs and they'd been sitting in the garden among roses just beginning to bloom, the air still cool enough that Maya had wrapped a blanket around herself against the evening chill. "I'm not Marcus," Dante had said finally, after Maya had spent 20 minutes explaining her fears in detail that probably exceeded what the situation required. "I understand why you can't fully trust that yet, why every offer of help triggers warnings about control disguised as care. But I need you to understand that my investment in your well-being and Lily's future isn't strategy designed to eventually own you. It's genuine concern from someone who has resources that cost me nothing to extend and who finds meaning in ensuring women escaping dangerous situations actually receive support that helps them build stability rather than just survive day to day." The certainty in his voice had been compelling, but it was what he said next that had actually shifted Maya's resistance into something approaching trust. "If at any point my presence in your life feels limiting rather than supportive, tell me and I'll create distance while maintaining the resources I've already committed. The housing, the job, Lily's scholarship, none of those are contingent on your continued acceptance of my personal involvement. They exist independently, because they should, because you deserve stability that isn't threatened by whether we remain friends or become something more, or decide that this entire situation has been too complicated from the beginning to navigate successfully." Maya had accepted Lily's scholarship enrollment the next day, acknowledging that her daughter's opportunities mattered more than her own discomfort with accepting help that felt disproportionate to the wrong number text that had started everything. The breakfast dishes are cleared and Lily is watching educational cartoons while Maya checks her work email when Dante's text arrives, meeting running late. We'll try to make it by 7:30, but might miss the beginning. Apologize to Lily for me if I don't arrive in time. The disappointment Maya feels is disproportionate to the situation. He's been present for dozens of Lily's moments already. Missing one presentation isn't betrayal or evidence that his interest was temporary, but something in her chest tightens anyway at the thought of Lily scanning the audience and not finding him there, at her daughter experiencing the small hurt of adult priorities outweighing children's hopes. She texts back, "No problem. She understands you're busy. We'll see you when we see you." The reply comes immediately. Tell her I'm proud of her regardless of whether I'm physically present. And tell her that she should look for the package that arrived this morning. It's addressed to her specifically. Maya finds a package on the townhouse's front step, where delivery services leave items too large for the mail slot. A box wrapped in purple paper with Lily's name written in Dante's distinctive handwriting, the kind of gift that suggests he'd been planning this regardless of whether his schedule allowed attendance. Lily opens it with the breathless excitement children bring to unexpected presents, revealing a necklace with a pendant shaped like an open book, the pages engraved with text too small to read without magnification, but that Lily traces with reverent fingers while reading the card tucked inside. For Lily, who reads with courage and writes with heart, may you always find stories that help you understand the world, and create stories that help the world understand you. Proud of you always. D. The gift is perfect in ways that expensive toys wouldn't be, personal rather than generic, acknowledging who Lily actually is rather than who adults imagine children should be, demonstrating attention that goes beyond showing up to specific events into actually knowing what matters to a small person whose love of stories has been the one consistent thing throughout all the disruptions and changes of the past year. Maya feels something shift in her chest, recognition that she's been protecting herself against feelings that have already developed beyond the safety of professional distance or grateful friendship, that Dante Volkov has somehow become essential to her daily life in ways that terrify and comfort her simultaneously. The presentation happens at 6:30 p.m. in the community center where the summer program has been meeting, Lily's project displayed alongside 20 other children's work about topics ranging from dinosaurs to space exploration to the history of pizza, her choice to focus on stories that save people, revealing more about her processing of recent trauma than Maya has been able to access through direct conversation. Lily explains to the assembled parents and program staff about how stories help people survive difficult situations, about Anne Frank in her diary, about Frederick Douglass learning to read despite laws prohibiting literacy, about modern authors who write about hard topics to help children understand that struggle is universal rather than isolating. Maya watches her daughter speak with confidence that didn't exist 6 months ago, standing straight and projecting her voice, and making eye contact the way the program instructors have taught, and feels pride mixed with grief for everything Lily has already had to understand about danger and survival, and the adults who fail children through violence or negligence, or the casual cruelty that systemic poverty enables. The audience applauds when Lily finishes, and Maya is preparing to go congratulate her daughter when she feels presence beside her, turning to find Dante in a suit that suggests he came directly from whatever meeting had threatened to make him miss this, his expression showing the focused attention he brings to moments that matter. "I made it," he says quietly, his hand finding Maya's shoulder with touch that's becoming familiar rather than startling, comfort rather than presumption. "She was remarkable." "She was," Maya agrees, watching Lily scan the crowd and light up when she spots them both standing together, her daughter's joy at having both the adults who matter present for this moment, making everything Maya has accepted and compromised and rebuilt feel justified in ways that logic alone can't quite capture. The reception afterward involves punch and cookies, and parents making small talk while children run around with the manic energy that comes from completing required performances and being released into sugar and freedom. Lily dragging Dante around to show him each element of her project while explaining details she'd omitted from the formal presentation. Maya watches them together, this powerful, dangerous man crouching to Lily's height while she explains her research methodology, asking questions that demonstrate actual interest rather than adult performance of caring, and acknowledges that she's already made the choice she's been avoiding consciously, that her heart has decided even while her mind continues generating objections based on reasonable fear. The drive back to Chelsea happens in Dante's car with Lily chattering in the back seat about her project and the other presentations, and which of her classmates she wants to stay friends with when regular school starts in September, her voice bright with happiness that creates soundtrack to the evening's successful conclusion. After Lily is asleep, teeth brushed and story read and nightlight activated, Maya finds Dante in the kitchen making tea with the automatic competence that suggests he's comfortable in the space in her home, in the routines they've developed over 3 months of living in proximity and carefully maintained boundaries. "Thank you for the necklace," Maya says, accepting the cup he hands her. She hasn't taken it off since opening the package. "She deserved acknowledgement beyond my attendance," Dante replies, leaning against the counter with a casual grace that makes his presence feel both dangerous and safe simultaneously. "The work she did was thoughtful and mature beyond her years, and I wanted her to know that was recognized." The kindness toward Lily is what has ultimately eroded Maya's defenses more effectively than any attention directed at herself could have managed, because men can perform interest in women strategically, but genuine care for children is harder to fake consistently across months and dozens of interactions. "Can I ask you something?" Maya says, the question emerging before her strategic mind can prevent it. "Always," Dante replies with a tension that makes her feel seen rather than evaluated. "What are we doing?" Maya asks, the words encompassing everything they've been carefully not discussing: his consistent presence in their lives, the dinners and conversations and accumulated intimacy that exceeds friendship without being formally acknowledged as romance, the way her heartbeat changes when he arrives and the disappointment when meetings prevent his attendance, the feeling that they're building something together without having explicitly agreed to construction plans. Dante is quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful rather than surprised, suggesting he's been waiting for this conversation, even if the timing is still uncertain. "What do you want to be doing?" he asks, which is both answer and deflection, placing the choice in her hands rather than imposing his own desires or expectations. Maya takes a breath, gathering courage that comes more easily now than it did 3 months ago when accepting his help had felt like surrendering autonomy rather than choosing practical support. "I want to stop pretending that what's happening between us is just landlord-tenant or employer-employee or even just friendship," she says, the honesty feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I want to acknowledge that you've become essential to my daily life in ways that probably aren't healthy given how recently I escaped a relationship that almost killed me, but that feel genuine rather than strategic, that feel like building towards something real rather than repeating patterns that destroyed me before." Dante sets down his tea with deliberate care, his full attention focusing on her in a way that makes the kitchen feel smaller, more intimate, charged with possibility that's been building since March but has remained carefully unacknowledged until this moment. "I have been trying," he says carefully, "to give you time and space to heal from trauma without adding pressure that would make you feel obligated by gratitude or dependent on resources I control. I've been trying to be present without being presumptuous, supportive without being controlling, interested without making you uncomfortable given the power imbalances that exist between us regardless of my intentions." He moves closer, not quite touching but near enough that Maya can feel the warmth of him, can see the intensity in his eyes that suggests his feelings match or exceed her own despite the careful distance he's maintained. "But if you're asking what I want," Dante continues, "I want to be with you, not as landlord or employer or helper. As partner, as someone who builds a life alongside you rather than providing resources from positions of power. As someone Lily can depend on not just for presence and attendance at presentations, but as consistent presence who's chosen to be family rather than accidentally stumbling into your lives through wrong number text." The declaration is everything Maya didn't know she'd been hoping to hear, confirmation that the past 3 months have meant the same things to him that they've meant to her, that careful friendship has been foundation for something deeper rather than simply his efficient response to crisis that happened to intersect with his personal guilt and resources. "I'm terrified," Maya admits, because honesty seems necessary if they're going to build something real. "Of trusting again, of being wrong about someone again, of putting Lily in position to be hurt when adult relationships fail or transform into something dangerous despite good intentions at the beginning." "Your terror is wisdom," Dante acknowledges without trying to dismiss or minimize her fears. Marcus taught you that charm and help can be strategies designed to create dependency that enables control. That lesson will serve you well in evaluating every relationship, including this one. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that some people offer help without strategic intention beyond actually helping, that generosity can exist without obligation attached, that you can accept support while maintaining autonomy and exit whenever circumstances stop serving your best interests. He reaches out slowly, telegraphing the movement, so Maya can refuse if she wants, his hand cupping her face with gentleness that contradicts every dangerous thing she knows about his capabilities and resources, and the violence he's certainly capable of even if she's never personally witnessed it. I won't promise perfection, Dante says quietly. I can't guarantee that being with me won't involve complications or challenges different from what Marcus represented but still difficult. What I can promise is transparency about who I am and what I do, respect for your autonomy and Lily's well-being, and commitment to building something sustainable rather than performing romance until the performance stops serving my interests. Maya leans into his touch, allowing herself to want this, to choose connection despite reasonable fear, to trust that her judgment has improved through trauma rather than being permanently damaged by it. Okay, she says simply, the word containing multitudes of hope and terror and determination to build something new rather than remaining paralyzed by what came before. The kiss happens slowly, Dante waiting for her to close the final distance, ensuring that she's choosing this rather than feeling pressured by circumstances or gratitude or the accumulated weight of 3 months spent carefully not acknowledging what was developing between them. His lips are soft against hers, the kiss gentle and brief, and somehow containing promise of future intimacy without demanding immediate escalation, respecting that healing proceeds in increments rather than dramatic transformations, that trust rebuilds through consistency rather than single moments of courage. When they separate, Maya feels steadier rather than destabilized, like choosing this has been affirmation of her own strength rather than admission of weakness or need for rescue that she can't provide herself. We should probably discuss practical details, Dante says with slight smile that makes him seem less intimidating. Like whether this changes the rent situation, or your employment, or any of the other arrangements that currently exist. Nothing changes professionally, Maya says firmly, because maintaining financial independence matters more than any romantic convenience. I pay market rate rent starting next month. My job performance gets evaluated on actual metrics rather than whether we're successfully dating. Lily's scholarship continues based on her merit and the program's assessment rather than our relationship status. Dante's expression shows approval rather than offense at her boundary setting, confirmation that he respects her need to maintain autonomy that economics and employment make vulnerable to his control if she's not careful about protecting herself. Agreed, he says simply. Though I'll note that market rate in Chelsea exceeds what you're currently paying significantly, and adjusting rent upward when your housing situation is stable seems counterproductive to everyone's interests. They negotiate compromise, rent increase that's substantial enough that Maya doesn't feel like she's accepting charity, but not so extreme that it destabilizes the financial security she's been building, the discussion itself demonstrating that they can navigate disagreements and power imbalances with honesty rather than manipulation or resentment. The summer progresses with new rhythm that includes acknowledged romance alongside the practical routines of work and childcare and life maintenance that continues regardless of emotional developments, Dante's presence shifting from helpful outsider to integrated family member in ways that make Lily ecstatic and Maya cautiously optimistic about futures that include partnership rather than just survival. August brings Marcus's trial, 3 days of testimony and evidence, and the systematic legal process that transforms personal trauma into public record. Maya sitting in witness box describing violence that almost happened and violence that had happened previously, and the fear that had characterized the final months of their marriage. Dante attends every session despite having no official role, his presence in the courtroom's gallery providing silent support without interfering with proceedings or making the trial about anything except Marcus's choices and consequences and the justice system's imperfect but necessary response to domestic violence. The verdict comes after 4 hours of jury deliberation, guilty on all counts, breaking and entering, violation of restraining order, assault with deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping when the prosecution successfully argued that his intentions toward Lily met the legal definition despite not having actually taken her from the apartment. The sentencing hearing happens 2 weeks later, the judge imposing 15 years with possibility of parole after 10, acknowledging that Marcus represents ongoing danger to Maya specifically and to intimate partners generally, that his behavior pattern suggests unwillingness to accept that relationships end, and that former partners have autonomy that must be respected even when it contradicts his desires. Maya feels something release in her chest when the sentence is announced. Not quite closure because trauma doesn't resolve through legal proceedings, but at least confirmation that Marcus won't be able to physically threaten her or Lily for the next decade, that they have time to build lives that don't include constant vigilance about his potential appearance and violence. Dante takes her and Lily to dinner afterward at a restaurant where Lily orders dessert first, and Maya allows it because some moments justify celebration even when the circumstances involve trauma and legal processes that shouldn't have been necessary if systems had protected her earlier. What happens now? Lily asks while eating chocolate cake that's probably too rich, but that she's consuming with single-minded focus. Now we keep living, Maya says simply, which is both insufficient and exactly true. We go to work and school. We have dinners and presentations and normal regular life that doesn't involve being scared. And Dante comes to dinner. Lily asks, seeking confirmation about the thing that matters most to her, stability of the adult who's become permanent fixture rather than temporary helper. Yes, Dante confirms before Maya can answer, his hand finding hers on the table with touch that's become familiar rather than startling. I come to dinner and presentations and whatever else you'll have me present for. Lily's smile is bright enough to justify every risk Maya has taken and accepted and chosen despite reasonable fear, confirmation that building stability for her daughter has been successful even if the path was unconventional and required accepting help that pride would have rejected if autonomy had been available luxury. September brings new school year. Lily starting first grade in a program that challenges her intellectually while surrounding her with peers and teachers who see her potential rather than just her circumstances. Maya continuing to develop affordable housing initiatives that help other women access stability without requiring wrong-numbered texts and billionaire intervention. The townhouse in Chelsea becomes officially home rather than temporary shelter. Maya's name added to a lease that formalizes arrangements and provides legal protection against displacement. Her furniture gradually replacing Dante's minimal furnishings as the space transforms from his property into their home. October brings Dante's birthday, which he mentions casually enough that Maya realizes he doesn't typically celebrate beyond perhaps dinner with business associates, that personal milestones have been subsumed into work obligations, and the constant activity that allows successful people to avoid examining whether their lives contain meaning beyond achievement. She and Lily plan surprise party with help from Dante's assistant Elena, who provides access to his calendar and list of people whose attendance would matter. The event happening in the townhouse's garden where fall colors create backdrop that photographs will preserve as evidence of this particular moment in their evolving story. Dante arrives home to find 30 people, including business associates and personal friends, and the detective who'd handled Marcus's case, and Maya's colleagues from work, and Lily's teacher who'd somehow been included because Lily insisted that people who help should be celebrated even if they're not officially family. His expression when seeing the assembled guests is worth every hour of planning, surprise and pleasure, and something softer that might be gratitude for being seen, and valued beyond his resources and reputation, for being celebrated because people genuinely care rather than because social obligation or business relationships require performance of connection. "Did you know about this?" he asks Maya, who'd maintained perfect innocence about the evening's plans despite his questions about why she insisted he needed to be home by 6. Lily planned it. Maya deflects, which is technically true, even if incomplete. I just helped execute her vision. The party is success measured by laughter and conversation, and the way Dante relaxes into enjoyment rather than maintaining professional control, allowing himself to be present in moment rather than constantly calculating next moves and strategic advantages. Late in the evening, after guests have departed and Lily is asleep upstairs, Maya and Dante sit in the garden among candles that provide only illumination against autumn darkness, the air cool enough that they share a blanket while discussing everything and nothing the way couples do when comfort has replaced the need for constant fascinating conversation. "Thank you," Dante says quietly, his arm around Maya's shoulders in gesture that's become automatic rather than deliberate. For tonight. For seeing that I needed celebration, even when I didn't ask for it. You've given me and Lily so much, Maya replies, leaning into his warmth. Celebrating you is the least we can do. You've given me more, Dante counters. A reason to come home to something beyond empty space. A child who asks about my day and genuinely wants to hear answers. A partner who challenges me to be better than just successful or feared, or whatever reputation I've cultivated. A life that feels like living rather than just surviving between business obligations. The confession reveals vulnerability Maya hasn't seen before. Acknowledgement that his resources and power haven't actually provided meaning, that the townhouse had been empty for reasons beyond renovation schedules, that her accidental text had disrupted isolation he'd been maintaining through constant work and strategic distance from personal connection. I love you, Maya says, the words emerging without planning or strategic consideration of timing, simply truth that's been growing since March and has reached point where not saying it feels like dishonesty. Dante's expression transforms, dangerous control yielding to something unguarded that makes him look younger and more vulnerable and entirely human despite everything that makes him intimidating to people who don't know him beyond reputation. I love you, he replies with certainty that erases any doubt about whether she's made terrible mistake trusting again. Both of you. You've become my family in ways I didn't think were still possible after losing my sister. You've transformed my life from successful isolation into something that feels like home. The kiss is deeper this time, containing promise and commitment, and the specific heat that builds between adults who've been carefully maintaining boundaries while feelings developed beyond friendship, who've waited until trust was established before allowing physical intimacy that vulnerability requires. They don't take it further tonight. Lily sleeps upstairs and rushing feels wrong when they have time to build toward intimacy gradually, but the promise exists between them, acknowledged and mutual, something to anticipate rather than fear. November brings Thanksgiving, which they celebrate at the townhouse with found family that includes Elena and Maria from work and Detective Morrison, who'd handled Marcus's arrest, and Lucia, who'd been the intended recipient of that original text, and whose cop boyfriend Marcus had been deliberately avoiding when planning his attack. The gathering is chaotic and warm, and filled with the kind of laughter that comes from people who've chosen each other rather than being obligated by blood, the table crowded and the food slightly burned and everything perfect in its imperfection. Lily says grace before dinner, her small voice thanking God for Mama and Dante and everyone who helps people when they're scared and for raw number texts that bring families together, which makes Maya laugh through tears that are joy rather than grief for the first time in longer than she can remember. December arrives with actual snow that transforms New York into the postcard version tourists imagine, Lily's excitement about winter and holidays and the promised trip to see the Rockefeller Center tree, making even the cold feel magical rather than punishing. Christmas morning happens early, Lily waking both Maya and Dante before sunrise with the breathless excitement children bring to holidays, dragging them downstairs to see what Santa brought and whether the cookies had been eaten, and photographing everything with the tablet she'd received from the program completion ceremony. The gifts under the tree are balanced between practical and indulgent, Maya and Dante having discussed extensively how to handle holidays without creating expectations of luxury that aren't sustainable, or teaching Lily that love is measured through expensive presents rather than attention and presence. But there's one box that Dante had hidden until this morning, small and wrapped with the kind of care that suggests significance beyond the gift itself, addressed to Maya in his handwriting. She opens it while Lily plays with new art supplies, revealing a key on a chain with inscription she has to read twice to fully process. Home is wherever we are together. D. It's the key to my penthouse, Dante explains when she looks at him with question in her eyes. I want you to have access to every part of my life. No locked floors or restricted areas. Complete transparency about who I am and where I spend time when I'm not here with you and Lily. The gesture is meaningful beyond the physical object. Acknowledgement that trust requires openness, that Maya's fears about hidden aspects of his life deserve addressing through action rather than just reassurance, that he's choosing vulnerability by giving her access to spaces she hasn't asked to enter but that represent significant part of his life beyond their relationship. Thank you, Maya says, the inadequate words carrying weight of everything she feels but can't fully articulate about trust earned and love that's been building in future that seems possible now instead of just theoretical hope she'd stopped allowing herself. The day progresses through traditional holiday activities transformed by Lily's enthusiasm and the newness of celebrating with family that's been chosen rather than endured. Dinner that includes too much food and laughter that echoes through the townhouse in ways that make the space feel fully inhabited rather than just occupied. That evening, after Lily is asleep with new stuffed animals and exhaustion from excitement, Maya and Dante sit by the fireplace, where gas logs provide heat without the work of actual wood, their bodies intertwined on the couch in comfortable intimacy that 9 months has created. "What do you want for next year?" Dante asks, the question encompassing everything from practical goals to impossible dreams. Maya considers, cataloging everything that's changed and everything that hasn't, everything she's built and everything she's still working toward, the distance between where she'd been in March and where she sits now feeling impossible to measure except through evidence of lives transformed. "I want this," she says finally. "Exactly this. Stability and safety, and a partner who sees me, and a daughter who's thriving, and work that matters, and a home that feels permanent rather than temporary until the next crisis forces relocation. I want to keep building what we've started without waiting for it to collapse because good things aren't actually meant for people like me. People like you deserve everything," Dante says firmly, tilting her face toward his so she can see the certainty in his eyes. "Deserve stability and safety, and love that doesn't come with conditions or violence attached. Deserve partnership and home and futures that extend beyond just surviving day to day. And I intend to spend however long you'll let me proving that those things are possible, that trust can be rebuilt, that families can be chosen and created rather than just inherited." "I believe you," Maya whispers, and realizes that she means it, that somewhere between March and December, terror and survival and wrong-numbered texts and impossible rescue, she's learned to trust again despite every reasonable objection her experience generates. The new year arrives with promises that feel achievable rather than just aspirational. Maya and Dante, and Lily watching fireworks from the townhouse's rooftop while the city celebrates around them, their small family contained and complete, and building toward futures that include each other rather than just parallel existences that occasionally intersect. "Thank you," Maya says to Dante while Lily points at explosions of color against dark sky. "For what?" he asks, though his expression suggests he knows. "For answering a wrong-number text. For showing up when I needed help. For staying when the immediate crisis passed. For building something real, instead of just performing rescue until the performance stopped being convenient. For loving Lily like she's yours even though she isn't. For giving me time to heal before expecting anything in return. For being patient with my fear and trust issues and all the complicated trauma that Marcus left me with. For everything." Dante's kiss is soft against her temple, affection rather than passion, comfort rather than demand. "Thank you for trusting me despite having every reason not to," he replies. "For letting me into your life and Lily's life. For building this family with me. For teaching me that success and power aren't the same as meaning or purpose. For showing me what home feels like after years of just having addresses where I slept between obligations. For being brave enough to love again despite everything that loving cost you before." Above them, fireworks continue painting the sky while the city celebrates transition into new year, new possibilities, new versions of themselves that honor who they've been while creating space for who they're becoming together. Later, Maya will look back on March and the desperate text that went to a wrong number as the moment everything changed, the crisis that somehow transformed into salvation through the intervention of a man who'd spent a decade ensuring he never again failed to respond when someone asked for help. But tonight, standing on a rooftop in Chelsea with her daughter and partner, and the future stretching ahead with promise instead of just fear, Maya simply feels grateful for wrong numbers and right people, and the impossible ways that life sometimes transforms trauma into healing, survival into thriving, accidentally sent messages into love that chooses to stay. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.